We live in the most connected era in human history. A message can circle the planet in seconds. And yet, more people feel alone than ever. Because connection isn't the same thing as closeness. Sometimes, you can be surrounded by millions and still feel like no one truly sees you. Now imagine a different kind of morning. No traffic, no sirens, no glowing screens. Just wind. Just distance. In the farthest corners of this planet, there are people who wake up, and the first sound they hear isn't a city waking up. It's the ocean, or the forest, or nothing at all. No internet, no easy way out, and sometimes no one else for miles. They are lighthouse keepers in angry seas, where storms don't knock on the door, they hit it. They are families living on islands so remote, the rest of the world feels like a rumor. They are people who choose ice over comfort because science demands a kind of isolation most of us will never understand. And they are monks living on pillars of stone that rise into the sky, not because they hate the world, but because they're searching for something deeper than noise. These are some of the most isolated people on Earth. But here's the question that matters. Why do they stay? Are they running from life? Or have they found something the modern world quietly erased? Something we lost along the way? Because isolation isn't always a punishment. Sometimes it's a choice. And in that choice, there might be a kind of truth we've forgotten how to hear. Welcome to the silence. Out here, the ocean doesn't feel like a view. It feels like a wall. On the map, Tristan da Cunha looks like a dot almost too small to matter. But when you pull the camera back, you realize what it really is. A single community, floating in the South Atlantic, nearly 3,000 kilometers from the nearest mainland. The closest point is South Africa, but close is a word that means something different out here. There are no airports, no quick flights, no last-minute trips. If you want to reach Tristan da Cunha, you go by ship. And that journey can take almost a week, 6 days of open water, where the waves don't care about schedules. Some years, only 8 or 9 ships arrive. That's it. So, when supplies run low, you wait. When the weather turns violent, you wait. And when you need help, you learn what patience really costs. And still, people live here. Not a handful, a whole community. Around 250 people, a place where everyone knows your name, and your story, and your family. Here, the world is small, but it's not empty. There's a kind of safety that comes from being known, the kind of safety most cities can't offer anymore. On Tristan da Cunha, crime is almost unheard of. People don't live behind alarms and locks. Some don't even lock their doors. Because when you are this far from everything, you don't survive by living like strangers. You survive by trusting the people beside you. And then came the moment that should have ended it all. In 1961, the volcano woke up. The island that had sheltered them suddenly became a threat. The entire community was evacuated, taken away from their dot in the ocean, and brought to England. For the first time, they stepped into a world of modern comfort, streets full of lights, shops full of food, a life where nothing had to arrive by ship. And you would think, after tasting that kind of convenience, no one would ever go back. But here's the twist. Most of them did. After 2 years, the majority chose to return to the island, back to the storms, back to the waiting, back to the edge of the world. Because to them, isolation wasn't a prison. It was protection. Protection from noise, from rush, from being surrounded and still feeling unseen. In a city, you can live next door to someone for 10 years and never learn their name. On Tristan, you belong the moment you wake up. And maybe that's what makes this island so powerful. Not the distance, not the ocean, but the reminder that sometimes the thing we call civilization isn't what people miss the most. Sometimes what they miss is being part of something small enough to feel real. Tristan da Cunha is isolation by distance. Day and island held apart by storms and open water. But Palmerston Island is something else entirely. Because here, isolation isn't just geography. It's family. From above, Palmerston looks like a postcard, a ring of coral surrounding water so clear it barely seems real. Turquoise shallows, white sand, palm trees bending in the wind. And tucked inside that beauty, simple wooden homes. No skyline, no streets, no crowds. Just a handful of lives on the edge of the Pacific. But the story of Palmerston doesn't begin with the city. It begins with one man. In 1863, a sailor named William Marsters arrived here, and he didn't come alone. He came with 3 wives. And over time, a settlement grew. Small, tight, unavoidable. Because today, almost everyone on Palmerston is descended from him. On many islands, you learn your neighbors' names. On Palmerston, your neighbors are your relatives. It's not just a community, it's a living family tree. And when the world works like that, everything changes. There are no stores here, no shopping runs, no quick solutions. Money doesn't mean much when there's nothing to buy. What matters is what you can catch, what you can grow, and what you're willing to share. Fishing isn't a hobby, it's survival. And when the boats come back in, the catch isn't measured in profit, it's measured in fairness. Because on an island like this, you don't get ahead by taking more. You get through by making sure everyone eats. But there's a reason Palmerston feels so fragile, too. Supply ships don't arrive every month. They don't arrive every season. Sometimes they come only twice a year. 2 chances in 12 months to restock what you can't make yourself. And when you live that far from help, even a simple medical emergency can become life or death. If you get a serious infection, someone is badly injured, if you need surgery, there may not be time. Something as common as appendicitis, a problem a hospital could treat in hours, can become a race you might not win. That's what isolation really means. Not just silence, but consequence. And yet, they stay. They raise children. They live their lives. They laugh. They work. They share meals. Because on Palmerston, your neighbor isn't just a neighbor. Your neighbor is blood. A society shrunk down to its simplest truth that survival depends on how much you're willing to care for the people beside you. In the modern world, independence is praised like a virtue. But here, independence is an illusion. Out here, you don't make it alone. You make it together, or you don't make it at all. And maybe that's the real reason Palmerston still exists, not because it's untouched by the world, but because it remembers something the world keeps forgetting. That isolation can break you. Or it can bind you to the people you love, until that bond becomes the only thing that matters. Palmerston Island survives because people stay close. Family close, life close, everything shared. But there's another kind of isolation that doesn't come from being far away. It comes from stepping away, on purpose. In the country of Georgia, in a quiet green valley, a limestone pillar rises straight out of the earth. 40 meters tall, nearly impossible to climb. And on top of that stone needle, balanced like a secret, is a tiny home. A small chapel, a place that looks too small for a human life. This is the Katskhi pillar. And for more than 20 years, a monk named Maxim Kavataradze has lived up there alone. Not because he had nowhere else to go, but because he believed the only way forward was upward. There's no road to the top, no stairs carved into the rock. Only a narrow metal ladder bolted against stone, hanging above open air. Every time he climbs, it takes about 20 minutes. 20 minutes of hands gripping steel while the ground falls away beneath him. Up there, his world becomes smaller than most people could tolerate. One room, a chapel, a few steps of space, and everything he needs, food, supplies, the basics of living, has to come up by rope. Pulled slowly on a simple pulley system. It's a life built around limits. And no convenience, no shortcuts. Just silence and sky and time. But the most surprising thing about Maxim's story is not what he left behind. It's what he was running from inside himself. Before the pillar, his life had fallen apart. He struggled, he drifted, he was imprisoned. And when he came out, he didn't go searching for comfort. He went searching for forgiveness. For him, the pillar wasn't an escape route. It was a place of repentance. A way to rebuild a broken life, without distractions, without noise, without the constant pull of the world. There's an old idea behind this kind of solitude. The higher you climb, the closer you are to God. Not because God lives in the sky, but because the higher you go, the quieter it gets. And in that quiet, you can finally hear the truth you've been avoiding. From the top of Katskhi, the valley below looks gentle. Trees moving in the wind, small roads, distant homes. The world goes on without you. And that's the point. Because solitude, sometimes, is the only medicine that can reach a shattered soul. He isn't hiding from life. He's studying it from a place that finally feels safe. Watching the world without being consumed by it. And maybe that's why this story hits so deeply, because it forces us to admit something uncomfortable. That the loudest prisons aren't made of stone. They're made of habits, regret, and the parts of ourselves we never learn to face. For Maxime, the way out wasn't a door. It was a ladder and a decision to climb. For Maxime, solitude was a ladder. A way to rise above his past and find peace in the quiet. But in Siberia, silence is not something you climb toward. It's something that closes around you. Here, the world isn't just far away. It's swallowed by trees, snow, and time. The taiga is endless. A forest so vast, it doesn't feel like a place. It feels like a separate planet. In winter, everything turns white. The air bites. The wind cuts through fabric like it isn't there. And hidden deep inside that wilderness, where there are no roads, no power lines, no footprints that stay for long, stood a small wooden cabin. old, weathered, almost disappearing back into the forest. In 1978, a group of geologists working in the region noticed something that didn't belong. A sign of human life in a place that should have been empty. And what they found was almost impossible to believe. A family living out there alone. Not for weeks, not for months, but for decades. The Lykov family had fled into the Siberian wilderness in 1936, trying to escape religious persecution. They walked away from the world, and the world kept moving without them. While history shook cities, while borders changed, while millions of lives were pulled into war, they stayed in the trees. They didn't know World War II had happened. Not because they didn't care, but because the news never reached them. Out here, information doesn't travel, it disappears. Their life was stripped down to the rawest version of survival. No salt, no metal tools, no comfort. Shoes made from bark, hands shaped by cold and labor. The kind of life most people couldn't last a week in, and they endured it for 40 years. When the outside world finally appeared at their door, it wasn't a rescue in the way we imagine rescue. Because even kindness can feel dangerous when you've lived in isolation long enough. And over time, that family faded into history. Until one day, only one remained. Agafya, an old woman wrapped in cloth against the cold, living with the forest as her only neighbor. She could have left. She could have gone to the city, to warmth, to hospitals, to lights in the darkness. But she refused. Because for Agafya, this place is not exile. It's home. She speaks to the trees. She sings into the wind. And to us, that sounds like loneliness. It sounds like a punishment. A frozen hell at the end of the world. But to her, the taiga is a mother's arms. Cold, yes. Unforgiving, yes. But familiar, protective, honest. Because when you've lived that long in the wilderness, the city doesn't feel like safety. It feels like noise. It feels like strangers. And maybe that's the deepest truth in her story, that isolation changes meaning, depending on what your soul is trying to survive. For some people, loneliness is a wound. For others, it becomes a language. Agafya chose the forest, and the forest held her in silence. But there's another kind of isolation, one that doesn't feel peaceful. One that doesn't feel sacred. Because sometimes people don't disappear to find God. .r to protect their souls. Sometimes they disappear for something simpler. Gold. High in the Peruvian Andes, there's a settlement that barely looks real. A city of steep dirt roads, thin air, and buildings that feel temporary, like they were built in a hurry and never meant to last. This is La Rinconada. It sits at around 5,100 meters above sea level. At this altitude, the human body doesn't feel normal. Breathing becomes work. Sleep becomes lighter. Every movement feels heavier than it should. And the cold doesn't just visit. It stays. The city is rough, crowded, unforgiving. There's no clean, easy comfort here. No simple version of daily life. Basic services that people take for granted, like clean water, like organized waste systems, like streets that feel safe and stable, They aren't guaranteed here. And yet, tens of thousands of people have come. Some estimates reach around 50,000. 50,000 lives stacked at the roof of the world. So the question becomes unavoidable. Why? Why would anyone choose a place where the air itself feels thin and hostile, where the landscape offers no mercy, and where the city around you feels like it could collapse into weather at any moment? The answer is buried in the mountain: gold. This isn't isolation caused by distance alone. It's isolation created by conditions. Because the world could reach La Rinconada, but most people don't want to. Not unless they're desperate. Not unless they believe there's a life-changing reward on the other side of suffering. Down in the cities, the modern world runs on comfort. Here, it runs on hope. And hope can be a beautiful thing. But hope can also be a trap. Because in La Rinconada, people aren't chasing a hobby, they're chasing a miracle. A single lucky break. A single find that turns struggle into escape. And when that miracle doesn't come, tomorrow becomes the promise. Just one more day. Just one more attempt. Just one more chance. Because the human mind can endure almost any isolation, if the prize feels big enough. Out here, hope and desperation exist in the same breath. They hang in the thin air together like fog that never fully clears. And that's what makes La Rinconada feel so haunting. Not just because it's high, not just because it's cold, but because it shows what people will trade away: health, comfort, stability, even community, for the idea that somewhere inside the mountain, their life could change forever. La Rinconada is a city built on hunger. A place where people chase gold, even when the mountain takes everything back. But there is a colder kind of isolation. One with no markets, no crowds, no promises. Just white. Antarctica. From the air, it doesn't look like a continent. It looks like another world. Endless ice, no trees, no roads, no cities in the distance. And deep inside that frozen emptiness, far from any coastline, sits a research station that looks almost unreal. Like a spacecraft resting on a white ocean. This is Concordia Station. And it may be one of the most isolated places humans can live without leaving Earth. In winter, the cold here can reach terrifying extremes. Temperatures can drop to around -80 degrees Celsius. At that point, the environment isn't just uncomfortable. It becomes actively hostile to life. Outside, exposed skin can freeze in moments. Metal becomes dangerous to touch. The air feels sharp, like it's cutting your lungs. And then there's the darkness. Polar night. Weeks where the sun never rises and the horizon never changes. But the most intense part of Concordia is not what you see. It's what you can't do. Because when winter closes in, no plane can land. The conditions are too extreme. The risk is too high. And that means the crew is completely cut off. Not for a weekend, not for a month, but for most of the year, around 9 months, trapped inside the same walls. No rescue, no evacuation, no backup plan waiting on a runway. Even if something goes wrong, there is no quick way out. And there's a reality here that feels almost impossible to say out loud. If someone dies during the winter, they can't be flown out. The station has to hold that loss and hold the body until the world becomes reachable again. That is the weight of isolation. Not just distance, but the knowledge that, for months, the outside world is not coming. And that's exactly why Concordia matters. Because this station isn't only a research outpost, it's also a mirror. A controlled environment where scientists study what isolation does to the human mind. The sleep patterns, the mood changes, the stress, the slow pressure of sameness. It's so extreme that it has been used to help simulate what life could feel like on Mars. In a way, Concordia is White Mars, because it's the closest thing we have to leaving Earth without a rocket. No forests, no oceans. Just a hostile surface outside and a small pocket of human life, trying to stay stable inside. And when the world goes quiet enough, the silence becomes its own sound. Heavy, thick, almost physical. Some people say that in places like this, you can hear your own body in a way you never do at home. Your breathing, your thoughts, even your heartbeat, steady and loud in a world with nothing else moving. And that's the true test of Concordia. Not the cold, not the darkness, but what happens when the outside world disappears and the only place left to escape is inside your own mind. After Concordia, it's hard to imagine a deeper kind of isolation. A place where you're cut off by ice and months of darkness and the reality that no one can reach you. But there is one kind of isolation that isn't created by nature, a line the modern world is not meant to cross. In the Bay of Bengal, hidden under a blanket of dense green rainforest, surrounded by bright white sand and shallow reefs, there is an island called North Sentinel. From a distance, it looks peaceful, almost unreal. And that distance is everything. Because the people who live here have made one thing brutally clear: they do not want contact. For tens of thousands of years, they have lived apart from the rest of humanity. Long enough that we don't know their language. We don't know what they call themselves. We don't even know what their world looks like from the inside. And whenever outsiders come too close, the answer is the same. A warning, a refusal. They have attacked approaching boats. They have defended their shoreline. Not because they are savages, but because this is what survival looks like when your entire history has taught you that outsiders bring danger. And the truth is, they're not wrong. Contact with the modern world could be catastrophic for them. A single virus, a single infection, something ordinary to us could wipe out an entire people who have no immunity to it. That's why North Sentinel is protected. Why authorities enforce strict exclusion zones. Why outsiders are not supposed to approach. Because this is not a place to visit. It's a protected boundary. A reminder that some parts of our world are not meant to be reached or explained or consumed. In a way, North Sentinel feels like a living time capsule, not preserved by museums, but by distance and by separation. And it forces us to face an uncomfortable truth. When people don't understand something, they often rush to label it. They assume fear. They assume hostility. They assume the other side must be wrong, simply because it's different. But maybe this isn't about aggression at all. Maybe it's about protection, about survival. Maybe they looked out at the ocean, saw the outside world drawing closer, and chose the only answer. That kept their way of life intact. Not an invitation, not a conversation, just a clear line that says, "Not here." Because isolation isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's a form of control. Sometimes the most powerful message a community can send is not "come in," but "please keep your distance." Isolation. We fear it. We fill our lives with noise so we never have to sit with it. We scroll. We work. We stay busy. Because silence can feel like a mirror, and not everyone wants to look. But after traveling to these places, to islands at the end of the ocean, to pillars of stone above the valley, to forests that erase the modern world, and to ice that feels like another planet, we start to see isolation differently. Not just as loneliness, but as a kind of truth. On Tristan da Cunha, people live far from everything, but close to each other. On Palmerston, community isn't a choice you make. It's the air you breathe. On the Katskhi pillar, a man climbs towards silence, not to escape life, but to rebuild it. In the Siberian taiga, Agafya remains not because she has nowhere else to go, but because her home is written into the trees and the wind. In Rinconada, people endure a life that feels impossible because hope can be heavier than stone and stronger than pain. And at Concordia, human beings live on the edge of survival, learning what the mind becomes when the outside world disappears. Each place is different. Each story is its own universe. But together, they reveal something simple. That the people we call isolated may not be the ones who are truly alone. Because they are connected. To the ocean, to the ice, to the forest, to faith, do family, to a rhythm older than the modern world. And maybe that's what we've been missing. We live surrounded by people, surrounded by screens, surrounded by notifications, and the constant rush to stay connected. But sometimes the noise is so loud, we can't hear ourselves anymore. Maybe the real question isn't, why do they live so far away? Maybe the real question is, why so many of us feel alone in the middle of everything? Thank you for watching. And if you could step away from the world for a while, get just one of these places tomorrow. Which one would you choose? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your answer.